Some secrets can never be spoken aloud. This is my story, one that changed everything. I thought I could control it, until it went too far. What began as a simple favor turned into something I'll never forget. My name doesn't matter, but my confession does. I never thought I'd find myself in a situation like this. It began innocently enough, or at least that's what I kept telling myself. My husband was often away on business, leaving me alone with our home, and sometimes with a quiet longing I couldn't name. I was careful to maintain the facade of a perfect wife, one who laughed, cooked, and pretended everything was fine. But inside, there was a storm, a craving that I didn't dare admit, even to myself. It was a Friday evening when it first happened. I had stayed back to finish some work while my husband left for a client dinner. That's when he appeared, my son. I don't mean my biological son in some bizarre scenario. No, he was the young man next door, the one who often helped with errands, whom I had known since he was a teenager. Now, grown and confident, there was something about him that stirred feelings I shouldn't have. We were alone, just the two of us in the kitchen. I tried to keep it casual, talking about mundane things, how work was, how the house was doing, but the air between us felt charged. I caught his eyes lingering on me a moment too long. I felt a warmth rise in my chest, a mix of guilt and desire. My thoughts were racing, warning me to step back, but every instinct in me wanted to lean closer, to feel more. He reached for a glass of water, and our hands brushed. A simple touch, yet electricity shot through me. I could feel my pulse in my ears, my breaths shallow. I had never imagined that something as small as a touch could awaken such dangerous desire, yet here it was, undeniable. And as he smiled, just a small, knowing smile, I realized this was no longer just tension, it was an invitation. I knew I should stop it. I knew I should tell myself this was wrong, but instead, I felt curiosity overpower caution. And then, in a moment of reckless impulse, I let him lean closer. My heart pounded, my body betraying the mind that was screaming at me to pull away. That was the beginning, the moment when everything shifted, when a simple glance became a dangerous game, and I knew there was no going back. After that first moment of accidental closeness, I couldn't stop thinking about him. Every day, my mind replayed that brush of fingers, that knowing smile, and the subtle weight of his presence in the room. I told myself it was just a fleeting curiosity, nothing more, but my body refused to lie. Desire had taken root, and it was growing faster than I could control. It was late one night, the house quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator. My husband was gone again on a last-minute trip, and the silence felt intoxicating. He had texted, asking if I needed help with some heavy boxes in the garage. I should have said no, of course, but the truth is, I wanted to see him. I craved the electricity between us, the unspoken tension that had been simmering for weeks. When he arrived, I tried to act casual. "Thanks for coming," I said, forcing a smile. But my heart was racing so violently I could barely breathe. He leaned in, joking about how I always overworked myself. There was a familiarity in his tone, a teasing warmth, and I felt my resolve weaken. As we moved the boxes together, our hands occasionally brushed, each touch more deliberate than the last. I caught him staring at me, really staring, and I felt something stir in the pit of my stomach, a dangerous mix of fear and desire. He was older than me, more confident, and I could sense that he knew exactly the effect he had on me. My body was betraying my mind, every nerve alive with anticipation. Then it happened. I didn't even realize how far I had let things go until it was too late. He stepped closer under the pretense of moving a box out of the way, but our proximity was no longer innocent. His hand grazed mine, lingered, and then traveled up my arm. I swallowed hard, trying to steady my breathing, but the warmth spreading through me was undeniable. I felt my pulse quicken, my thoughts spinning out of control. I should have stopped him. I should have said something, anything. But instead, I leaned into the touch, letting myself feel sensations I hadn't allowed myself in years. Every fiber of my being screamed that this was wrong, so wrong, but desire had drowned out the voice of reason. And when he pressed a little closer, his gaze locking with mine, I felt a thrill that scared and excited me at the same time. By the time he left, I was trembling. Not just from the physical closeness, but from the realization that a line had been crossed, a line I couldn't ignore. I knew I was playing with fire, yet a part of me craved more, wanted more, and the guilt only intensified the longing. Every time I imagined that night, the memory consumed me, made me ache for the forbidden connection I had just begun to explore. I had no intention of stopping, even though the danger was real. My husband was completely oblivious, and I was now caught in a web of desire, secrecy, and excitement I couldn't untangle. And deep down, I knew the next encounter would change everything. It started as a small, almost accidental moment, but that night changed everything. I couldn't stop thinking about him, the way he looked at me, the heat in his eyes, the subtle way his hand lingered just a little too long. Every memory sent shivers down my spine, a mix of shame and craving that I couldn't deny. A few days later, he came over again under the guise of helping me with a few things around the house. The moment the door closed behind him, I felt the familiar pull in my chest, that magnetic tension that had been building for weeks. I tried to act normal, to talk about mundane things like the weather or groceries, but the conversation quickly dissolved into stolen glances and subtle touches. It was impossible to ignore the way his fingers brushed mine as we carried a box together, how his arm occasionally pressed against mine, or how close he stood when explaining something trivial. Every accidental, or maybe not so accidental, contact set my skin on fire. I could feel the desire pooling in me, strong and undeniable. My body was betraying my mind in the most delicious way, and I was powerless to resist. Then came the moment I will never forget. I was in the living room, pretending to sort through some old papers while he helped move furniture. He stepped closer, his body brushing against mine under the pretense of adjusting the couch. I tried to pull away, telling myself this was wrong, that I had to stop, but my hands shook and my breath caught in my throat. He didn't push, he didn't rush. But the way he looked at me, that quiet, knowing gaze, it was impossible to resist. Slowly, deliberately, he leaned in, and I felt the warmth of his mouth against mine. It was gentle at first, exploratory, but it ignited something in me that I hadn't felt in years. My body responded instinctively, leaning into him, melting against his touch, and in that moment, every line I had drawn for myself vanished. I lost track of time. Every touch, every brush of his hand, every whisper of his voice sent me spiraling deeper into desire. I knew my husband was unaware, blissfully ignorant, and part of me felt both guilty and exhilarated by the secrecy. The danger only heightened the thrill, making every heartbeat pound louder, every nerve tingle with anticipation. By the time it ended, I was trembling, a mix of satisfaction and fear washing over me. I had crossed a boundary I could never uncross, but the pull I felt toward him was impossible to deny. I knew there would be consequences if anyone ever discovered, but for now, the moment existed only for us, suspended in secrecy. That night, as I lay awake, replaying every detail over and over in my mind, I realized that something inside me had shifted irrevocably. The desire wasn't going away, it was growing stronger, louder, demanding more than I was prepared to admit. And I knew, deep down, that the next encounter would not be a gentle brush, it would be something far more consuming. I never imagined desire could be so consuming, so overwhelming, until that night. Each day leading up to it had been filled with stolen glances, subtle touches, and the gnawing anticipation of what I knew was inevitable. I tried to focus on my routine, on work, on my husband, but nothing could erase the pull he had over me. It was as if every nerve in my body remembered the last time he had touched me, and it demanded more. He came over again, ostensibly to help with some home repairs. I should have sent him away, should have maintained my composure, but the moment I opened the door and saw him standing there, I felt the familiar heat spread through me. His smile was slow, teasing, and my knees betrayed me. There was a tension in the room that was impossible to ignore, a tension I no longer wanted to ignore. We started with casual conversation, but our proximity made casual impossible. Each time he brushed past me, leaned in to explain something, or offered to hold something heavy, I felt a thrill shoot through me. I could see it in his eyes too, the way his gaze lingered, the subtle smirk, the unspoken understanding between us. I realized, with a mixture of fear and longing, that the desire I had tried to suppress was mirrored in him. Then, in a moment that seemed inevitable, he closed the distance. There was no hesitation this time. He reached for me, not gently, not tentatively, but with a certainty that left me trembling. My body responded instinctively. I leaned into him, feeling the press of his body, the warmth of his touch. Every warning in my mind was drowned out by the fire he ignited within me. I felt his hands exploring, tracing lines along my back and shoulders, and my breath hitched with each movement. I had never allowed myself to feel this alive, this raw, this unrestrained. My husband remained completely oblivious, and that secrecy only added to the intensity. Every glance over my shoulder, every sound outside the door, heightened the thrill, reminding me that what we were doing was forbidden, yet irresistible. Time blurred. The living room, the couch, the soft hum of the refrigerator, all faded into the background as I surrendered completely. The mix of fear, guilt, and overwhelming desire made every moment feel electric. I felt consumed, yet more alive than I had in years. I couldn't stop, didn't want to stop. Every touch, every whispered word, pulled me deeper into the web we were weaving, a dangerous, intoxicating dance of lust and secrecy. When it finally ended, we both sat in silence, catching our breaths, the room heavy with unspoken truths. I was trembling, not just from the physical intensity, but from the knowledge that I had crossed yet another line, one I could never uncross. And yet, as he left, there was a quiet understanding between us, a promise of more, a recognition of the power we now held over each other. That night, alone in my bedroom, I stared at the ceiling, heart racing, mind spinning. I knew I was playing with fire. I knew there would be consequences if anyone ever discovered. But for the first time in years, I felt truly alive, truly desired, and utterly powerless to resist the pull that he had over me. The next time, I realized, would not be gentle, it would be a reckoning of desire, passion, and secrecy that I was both terrified of and aching for. The morning after that last encounter, I sat by the window, clutching a cup of coffee that had long gone cold. The air was still, heavy, almost accusing. For the first time in weeks, I allowed myself to think about what I had done, really think about it. The secrecy, the stolen moments, the rush of desire that had taken over my better judgment. It wasn't just a secret anymore, it had become a part of me, a dangerous truth hidden behind every smile I gave my husband. Every sound in the house made my heart jump. Every time my husband called my name, I felt a flicker of guilt in my chest. And yet, beneath the shame, there was still a small, quiet spark of something I couldn't quite extinguish, something that felt alive. It terrified me to realize that the very thing that made me feel most guilty also made me feel most human. He texted me later that day. Just one line, "Are you okay?" It was simple, harmless, but my heart raced as if he had written something far more dangerous. I stared at the screen for a long time before replying, "We can't do this anymore." My fingers trembled as I pressed send. But the truth was, even as I wrote those words, I wasn't sure I meant them. It wasn't easy to walk away from someone who had seen through the cracks, someone who made me feel seen and wanted. Still, I knew I had to make a choice. My life was built on foundations that couldn't survive the weight of this secret forever. That evening, I cooked dinner for my husband as if nothing had changed. He laughed about something that happened at work, completely unaware of the emotional storm raging inside me. I smiled, nodded, asked questions, all while trying to convince myself that I could slip back into my old life. But I knew it would never be the same. I had changed. When I went to bed that night, I lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling, the sound of my husband's steady breathing beside me. My mind replayed everything, the looks, the touches, the whispers, and for the first time, I allowed myself to cry. Not just for what I had done, but for what it meant. I hadn't just betrayed my husband, I had betrayed a part of myself. I realized then that some secrets aren't meant to be confessed out loud, they live inside you, shaping the way you see the world forever. What happened between us will remain a silent chapter in my life, one that no one will ever read but me. And while I can't undo it, I can choose what comes next. Tomorrow, I told myself, I would start again. I would rebuild the parts of me that I had lost along the way. But I also knew that somewhere deep down, a small piece of me would always remember the feeling of being truly seen, and the cost that came with it. This story is a work of emotional reflection, meant for mature audiences who understand that not every confession is about right or wrong, it's about being human. Some choices never leave us, they stay buried in silence, shaping who we become. If this story touched you, if you've ever carried a secret of your own, you're not alone. There's always a story behind every quiet smile. Thank you for listening to my anonymous confession. If you'd like to hear more untold stories of love, betrayal, and redemption, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to this channel. Your support helps bring more real voices and emotional truths to life.